If you're a freelancer who spent the last 2 years drowning in client emails, chasing invoices, and copy-pasting the same project brief into 17 different apps, this video is specifically for you. Not for the venture-backed startup with a 12-person ops team. Not for the influencer with a full-time assistant. For you, the person who is literally every department at once and still somehow has to do the actual work. I spent the last several weeks testing 10 AI workflow automation tools, and I'm going to tell you exactly which ones saved me real billable hours, which ones added more steps than they removed, and which ones were basically just a subscription fee wearing a trench coat pretending to be a product. Here's the thesis, and I'm going to say it up front so we're not dancing around it for 10 minutes. Most AI workflow automation tools are solving problems that don't exist and charging you monthly for the privilege. Out of 10 tools I tested, 3 of them genuinely changed how I work. 2 of them were fine but replaceable. And 5 of them, made my workflow measurably worse, either by adding friction, requiring constant babysitting, or just straight up hallucinating information into my client deliverables. So the real question isn't should freelancers use AI automation. The real question is, which 3 tools are actually worth your time, and how do you use them without turning your workflow into a subscription landfill? Before we get into the tools, let me introduce you to the character who's going to follow us through this whole video, because I think it'll make the stakes feel real. Her name is Priya, and she's a composite of about a dozen freelancers I know personally. She does brand strategy and content work. She has somewhere between 4 and 8 active clients at any given time, and she bills roughly $6,000 a month. She's not struggling, but she's also not scaling, because she's spending about 15 hours a week on admin, communication, and project management instead of billable work. Sound familiar? Priya tried 3 AI tools before I started this test, and all 3 of them are still sitting in her browser bookmarks, unused, because the setup took longer than the problem they were supposed to solve. Okay, so let's talk about how I actually ran this test, because methodology matters and I don't want you thinking I just vibed with some apps for a weekend. I used each tool for a minimum of 2 weeks in a real freelance workflow, meaning real client projects, real deadlines, real consequences if something broke. I tracked 3 things: time saved per week, number of new steps the tool introduced, and whether I could trust the output without manually checking everything. That last one is the killer metric that nobody talks about, because an AI tool that saves you 30 minutes but requires 20 minutes of verification has saved you 10 minutes. And 10 minutes is not a revolution, it's a slightly better morning. Sarcastic, let's start with the tools that failed, because honestly this is the most educational part and also the most entertaining. Category 1, the over-engineered automation builders. I'm talking about tools that promise to connect every app you use into one beautiful automated pipeline, and then spend 3 hours asking you to map fields, define triggers, write conditional logic, and essentially become a part-time software engineer just to automatically move a Notion card when a client emails you. I tested 2 of these, and both of them had me watching YouTube tutorials for setup steps that were supposedly no code. No code, by the way, is a phrase invented by people who forgot that reading a flowchart is still code with extra steps. Category 2 of the failures, the AI writing assistants that were marketed specifically as client communication tools. The pitch was basically, never write a client email again, which honestly I was ready to believe. What actually happened is that the AI would draft emails that were technically correct but had the emotional warmth of a parking ticket. One tool kept signing off my emails with best regards, Shad AI assistant, which, great, really building that personal brand there. Another one would confidently summarize a client thread and get the deadline wrong, which is the kind of mistake that doesn't just waste time, it actively damages client relationships. I caught it, but only because I read it, which means I was doing the work anyway. Now here's the part I promised you earlier, and I want you to stay with me through the next section because this is where it gets genuinely useful. In a few minutes, I'm going to show you the exact 3-tool stack that saved Priya and me somewhere between 8 and 12 hours a week, and I'm going to walk you through how to set it up without a single tutorial video or a support ticket. But first, I want to explain why most freelancers pick the wrong tools, because if you understand the mistake, you won't repeat it even when the next shiny thing shows up in your feed. The mistake is this: freelancers evaluate AI tools based on features, and they should be evaluating them based on friction. A tool with 20 features that takes 45 minutes to set up and requires you to remember a new interface is worse than a tool with 3 features that you can use in the same app you already have open. This is why so many of the best AI tools for freelancers lists online are useless. They're written by people who reviewed the demo, not the daily use. The demo is always clean and fast and impressive. The daily use is where you find out that the AI needs a specific prompt format, or that it only works if your files are named a certain way, or that the free tier throttles you right when you're on a deadline. Okay, so let's get into what actually works. Tool number 1, and this is the one I was most surprised by, is using a large language model, specifically Claude or GPT-4o, as a dedicated client communication layer, but with a twist that most people skip. The twist is that you don't use it to write emails from scratch. You use it to rewrite your rough drafts. You write the email the way you'd actually say it, messy and direct and maybe a little too blunt, and then you paste it in and ask the AI to make it professional without removing your voice. This is the difference between AI replacing your communication and AI improving it, and it's a distinction that matters enormously for freelancers who have built client relationships on personality. The time savings here are real and they compound. For Priya, client communication was eating about 4 hours a week, not because she was slow, but because she was a perfectionist about tone and wording, and every email went through 2 or 3 rewrites in her head before she sent it. Using the rough draft to polish method, she cut that to about 90 minutes, and her clients actually told her emails felt more responsive and clearer. Which, look, I know how that sounds. The AI made her communication more human. But it makes sense when you think about it, because she was spending all that time second-guessing herself, and the AI just removed the second-guessing and kept the substance. Tool number 2 is where I'm going to lose some of you, because it's not a dedicated AI tool at all. It's a workflow automation platform you've probably already heard of, used with AI actions built in. I'm talking about Make, formerly Integromat, specifically using their native AI modules to automate the intake-to-onboarding pipeline. Here's what that actually means in practice. A new client fills out your intake form, the automation pulls the key information, drafts a project brief, creates a folder structure, and sends a welcome email, all without you touching anything. The setup takes about 2 hours the first time and then it runs forever. I timed it. From intake form submission to fully set up project folder, it was taking me about 45 minutes manually. With this automation, it takes about 4 minutes. Excited, and here's the part that genuinely surprised me, because I went in expecting to find the catch. The AI module inside Make can read the intake form responses and actually customize the project brief based on the client's answers. Not just fill in a template, but adjust the scope language, flag potential scope creep risks, and suggest a timeline based on similar projects. I tested this with 8 different fake client profiles, and it was accurate enough to use as a starting point without editing in 6 out of 8 cases. 6 out of 8 for a 2-hour setup. That's the math that actually moves the needle for a solo freelancer. Tool number 3 is the one I almost didn't include because it feels almost too simple, and I was worried it would seem like I was padding the list. But after 2 weeks of using it, I think it might actually be the highest leverage tool on this entire list for most freelancers. It's a meeting transcription and summarization tool. I tested Otter AI and Fireflies, and both of them work. But the key is not the transcription itself, it's what you do with the transcript. After every client call, I paste the transcript into Claude and ask it to extract 3 things: the decisions made, the action items with owners, and any scope changes mentioned. This takes about 90 seconds and produces a follow-up email that I send to the client within 5 minutes of hanging up. The reason this is so powerful for freelancers specifically, and I want to be precise here because this is where the real value is that it creates a paper trail of scope changes in real time. Every freelancer I know has had a client say, "I never asked for that," or "I thought that was included." And the answer to that conversation is always the same: documentation. When you send a follow-up email within 5 minutes of every call that says, "Here's what we decided and here's what changed," you are building a scope protection system that would have cost you a lawyer to set up manually. Priya used this on a project last month, and it saved her from eating $1,200 worth of revision work because she had the email thread to point to. Serious now, I want to talk about the tools that were fine but not transformative, because I think this category is actually the most dangerous for freelancers. These are the tools that are good enough to justify the subscription, but not good enough to actually change your output. And they're the ones that quietly accumulate into a $40 a month subscription stack that you barely use. I tested 2 AI project management assistants in this category. I won't name them because they're both genuinely decent products, and both of them had the same problem. They required me to keep the tool open and actively use it for the intelligence to kick in. The moment I went back to my normal workflow, the AI layer became invisible and useless. This is the subscription landfill problem, and it's real. The average freelancer I've talked to is paying for somewhere between 8 and 12 SaaS tools at any given time, and actively using maybe 4 of them. The AI wave has made this worse because every existing tool has bolted an AI feature onto their product and raised their price by 30%. And now you're paying for AI inside your project manager, AI inside your invoicing tool, AI inside your email client, and none of them talk to each other and all of them want to be your main interface. The honest answer is that you probably need to cut your stack before you add to it, and the 3 tools I just described can replace at least 4 things you're currently paying for. Okay, so let's come back to Priya because I want to close the loop on her story and give you the actual numbers. Before this stack, she was spending roughly 15 hours a week on non-billable admin work. After 6 weeks with the 3-tool setup, the rough draft communication method, the make intake automation, and the meeting to follow-up pipeline, she's down to about 6 hours a week. That's 9 hours recovered. At her billing rate, 9 hours is somewhere around $1,300 a week in potential additional billable time. She hasn't filled all of that with client work yet. Actually, that's not entirely fair. She's filled about half of it, but even half is $600 a week she wasn't capturing before, and that compounds. Whispers, here's the thing nobody in the AI tools space wants to say out loud. The best workflow automation for freelancers isn't about doing more things. It's about doing fewer things with higher confidence. The tools that failed in my test all had one thing in common. They were trying to replace judgment. The tools that worked were augmenting judgment. There's a massive difference between an AI that says, here's the email, send it, and an AI that says, here's a draft based on what you wrote. Does this sound right? One of those is a liability. The other one is a really good assistant. And as a freelancer, your judgment is literally your product. So any tool that tries to root around it is actually eroding the thing clients are paying you for. So here's your one action for today. And I'm going to be specific because explore AI tools is not an action. It's a procrastination strategy. Take your last 5 client emails and paste them into Claude or GPT-4o with this prompt. Here are 5 emails I've sent to clients recently. What patterns do you notice in how I communicate? And what's a template I could use as a rough draft for similar situations in the future? That's it. You're not replacing your voice. You're building a starting point from your own voice, and the whole thing takes about 15 minutes. That's the lowest friction entry point into AI workflow automation that I've found, and it doesn't require a new subscription, a new app, or a tutorial video. The next video I'm making is going to go deep on the make automation setup specifically. I'll walk through the exact scenario structure I built for client onboarding, including the AI prompt I use inside the module and the folder naming convention that keeps everything sane. If that sounds useful, it'll be up in about a week. And if you want to share which AI tools you've already tried and whether they actually worked for you, drop it in the comments. I'm genuinely curious whether the pattern I found holds up across different types of freelance work, or whether I just got lucky with my specific workflow. Either way, I'll see you in the next one.